why don't you, give just a quick Sean bio, to them, so let everybody know who you are and where you come from.
Yeah. So I live in Berlin now. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, Midwestern boy, and I have a big family there. Um, my father was a professional trumpet player, played with the band called Ebony Rhythm Funk Campaign, which they had some hits in the 70s funk soul era. They were opening for like Earth, Wind and Fire and things like this. They had a song that went to, I think, #2 on the soul charts at one point. So but due to just the tragedy, I never had a chance to meet my father. My father was killed when I was a baby. And but my mother, he had told my mother at one point, he had told her that I should play the piano. And my mother played guitar, and my mother had a really beautiful voice. She'd stopped at some point, she kind of stopped singing. She wrote songs and things like this, but was not a professional musician. Just really did as much as she could to kind of provide for me and help and raise me. And my mother has a big family. There's 12 of them, brothers and sisters. And so I grew up kind of raised with my grandparents because my mother was working nights. And so I was around a lot of kids and around a lot of people. And even though I was kind of like an only child existence on one level, because I was this time, but at the same time, I was around a lot of kids, a lot of cousins and stuff, sleeping at my grandparents, and just all these kids, cousins coming in and out. So
Yeah.
that's how I grew up as a kid. I was raised in Indianapolis. I continued playing piano. I never really invested, like, I didn't really quite understand. I think until much later. It wasn't until I was about 20 years old or so that I kind of started to understand how much time and energy I needed to put in, like how much time because I was practicing growing up and stuff. I would play a half an hour a day or something, which for other kids, for the average kid, that seems like a lot, actually. I mean, students that I've had over the years, for sure, if I could get them to practice a half an hour a day, that'd be great. But if you're going to be a professional musician, that's not really sufficient, to be honest with you. But anyway, it was enough. I mean, I had a lot of natural talent, and I was doing competitions and all this stuff, and and then at some point I also started singing. And I ended up going to university. I got scholarships for music and things like this. And so I studied music for like 1 year, didn't like that environment. And then I was more interested in the other courses and philosophy and sociology and all these other, things that were stimulating my mind, to think in new ways. And so I ended up getting a degree in literature. And but actually, though, I also was playing in bands. At this time, I was performing. I was very active in the poetry scene and the spoken word poetry scene. I was in Chicago. I studied in Chicago.
Okay.
And so I had moved to Chicago at this point when I was like 18. And then I was really very active there, exploring the city and checking out as much as I could. That poetry scene was really rich. This underground spoken word scene that I was involved in was really great, and the jazz scene and just some musicians around. And I mean, I was in a band, the first kind of band I was in, like the bass player for that band is literally a legend for this generation at this point. He's like a very, very famous bass player. He was doing sessions with Aretha Franklin and stuff, like when we were, he was playing with Destiny's Child and stuff as soon as we graduated. So so I was around a lot of wonderful musicians. I was very lucky to have that experience in Chicago. And And but and then I was like, you know what? I need to really focus, at some point. And then I just started practicing like crazy, making up for the lost time. Like I said, I had a certain amount of ability for sure, it's like keys and stuff and singing.
Of
But
course.
like then I started practicing, doing my 6 hours a day and this kind of thing, which is obviously a whole nother level of like dedication and discipline. And it's funny, I think about it now because I see the kids with so many distractions. I was lucky
Mm,
I didn't have a smartphone at that time, like it was just you in a practice room and you go out and get a breath of fresh air, and then just go back. There's not all these distractions now. I mean, now I see people coming up, you have so many resources with YouTube and like,
yes.
man, you can learn so much. And that's amazing. But on the other side, the ability to focus, it was just, I think it's hard. It's got to be harder now. I mean, it's harder for me. I can imagine it has to be more difficult for the young people coming up. But anyway, so yeah, I did that, and I just continued. And I at some point, I I met some people, met someone who kind of was also studying with and kind of was a bit of a mentor. And he was like, you're ready, you're ready, like, to release some stuff. And he heard some songs, I've been writing and everything, which was big because I don't really, that was big because I don't really know when I would have thought I was, quote, ready, personally.
Yeah.
When do you ever think that, what does that mean exactly? So that was actually really important. It was David Bloom, and he was like, yeah, you're ready to do this. And so that I went in the studio, recorded that first album, Natural Hunger, with just killing musicians. That album, all those albums are just, really great musicians. And, musicians who are way beyond my personal level as like a pianist or something like that. But the beauty of it was, I think I was able to just rise, hopefully, I think, rise to the occasion at the moment. You're in the studio, you have the time, and you just got to bring it. You got to be there and be present and just make it happen. And that was a great lesson because I was able to do that in those sessions, even though the experience and just caliber of some of those players who had been doing it for way longer than I was, and just top level pros in Chicago, was able to hang with those guys in the session and really make the music happen and come out well, because I was really recording everything in real time. I wasn't overdubbing vocals either. The
Mm.
vocals and piano and everything was happening in real time. So and that was just something I worked really hard to be able to do. The playing and singing was something I remember when I played and then I sang, and then I was like, I want to play and sing at the same time. I really had to break myself down and yeah, figure out how to do that. So anyway, that was the first album. And so sorry, I'm just going on and on. It's hard to sum up so many years. And then, I just kept going, kept releasing music, kept playing with great people, trying to learn as much as I could, traveling around, playing gigs, playing in all kinds of different settings. Sometimes you're making like really terrible money, and sometimes you're making really good money, and just doing living a musician's life. And I released the first 3 albums while I was still living in the States. Some point traveling came through Berlin. I was like, wow, this is great. I loved it. And then after I had a chance to come back here, ended up staying for a couple of months that turned into what is now like
Yeah.
9 years, man.
9 years.
Yeah. You don't plan it that way. Well, I didn't plan it that way, but that's the way it worked out.
Yeah, the same for me. Sure. But thank you so much for sharing, because I didn't know a lot about you and, for example, your first album. What got into poetry, Sean? Because I mean, I love lyrics.
Yeah.
I'm a person who loves discovering the message
Yeah.
behind, the music. So what got into poetry?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the poetry thing bit me really early. I mean, well, I was writing because actually I did start writing songs and things kind of early. I mean, when I was my early teens, I remember sitting there and kind of trying to writing some songs down, writing some stuff down, you know. And I was writing. I wrote at some point. I started writing a lot, just writing, whether it was poems or lyrics or whatever, just my ideas. And and then, like I said, when I went to university, also like I continued to develop that. I was really studying a lot of poets and just very active in that spoken word scene. And just, I mean, it's to me, it's like the heart of what I do. Actually, the heart of the music for me is the poetry and is
Is
the
the
lyrics.
poetry?
Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah,
lyrics.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, like to me, the music all kind of revolves around like the way the way I kind of put lyrics together in a certain way. Like,
Mm. So powerful. Um, one of, uh, if you think about your music, if you think about the lyrics, you know,
mm,
some of your songs in your albums, one of the common denominators is, I mean, one of the topics
mm,
I hear the most is
mm,
love. So,
mm.
for example, Breathless, there's a beautiful passage in
Breathless.
Bedrock Wyndham, yeah, where you say, I believe in love and believe in freedom. So, for example, also in Strata Records, Face at
Mm,
the Window
yeah.
touches love as well. I mean, in a different
Mm,
way.
yeah.
But, so why this connection to love? I mean, what
Well, I
what does love mean to you in your music?
yeah, I mean, I think love tends to present itself definitely differently in my music than I guess the classic sort of soul R&B way of often talking about love. I mean, um, in a way that I'm always, I guess, kind of wrestling with what that is actually. I'm always trying to get a grasp on that. And it's oftentimes a bit abstracted. Sometimes it's also brutal in
Mm,
a way. I don't write like these tend to write like these gushing love songs for
okay.
someone or something. It's oftentimes kind of through a way of looking at the world, a way of feeling, a way of trying to understand myself.
So self-expression. So
Yeah.
love through self. Okay. Love that.
I mean, it is like also obviously like with another person or the world around me, you know.
Of course.
But definitely like a lot of times I'm definitely exploring just what exactly is love, you know, and how this plays out in our lives. And yeah, just the effect it has had, and the way we're driven. um you know, I think a lot about um our desires, and this first album, Natural Hunger, even just the title, I guess, you know, like like was thinking about that, I think, at the time, just sort of what these sort of raw emotions and feelings we have, you know, and just that we try to grapple with. Sometimes you just really you try to control things sometimes that, you know, are instinctual,
Mm,
you know.
yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean, Sean.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because the first time I listened to your voice,
Hmm.
I was like, there's a little bit of Jill Scott Heron in terms of the deepness. I
Yeah.
mean, that's me.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
what is your inspiration? What's your biggest inspiration in music, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, the Gil thing, it's, I mean, I just get that because I always tell people we're like from the same tree, you know, there's like these vocal trees, and I come out of that same place, you know, as Gil does in a lot of ways. And funny enough, I just because it was maybe like 10, 12 years ago, I was playing a concert in Paris, and Brian Jackson, who wrote all, you know, all that music with Gil Scott Heron, like he was just in the audience, and so we kind of became friends and afterwards,
I love it.
and met, hung out, and but so yeah, somehow there's a connection there for sure. Inspirations, yeah, definitely. I mean, I heard Gil Scott Heron through my uncle, one of my uncles, for sure he was playing. But definitely also like Bobby McFerrin, you know, as far as vocalists go, Bobby McFerrin, Joe Williams, like the Joe Williams, like I really loved Joe Williams. I love Joe Williams. Such a great personality. And you know, he was in the Cosby Show too. But and just he just seemed like such a great person. But yeah, Andy Bay, huge
Mhm.
influence, also huge. When I discovered Andy Bay, I really fell in love with him. There's this album, Gary Bart's in the Into You Troop, this Harlem Bush music album, which was massively uh, inspirational. And you know, out Nat King Cole, of course, like all these people that I'm naming, I kind of came. There are people who have a similar kinds of sounding voices, you know, and who you kind of listen to and see how are they managing that? How are they using their voice? Leon Thomas too,
Mhm.
um, and then I was massively influenced by hip hop too, and stuff like when I first heard the Freestyle Fellowship and hearing those guys, you know, somebody like Micah Nine, and then just how he was using his voice, Abstract Rude, hearing uh, the Far Side was
Mhm.
also a huge influence for me. Like it just because I was essentially as I was into jazz, and then I was listening to hip hop from very young, and so I guess all that stuff made sense to me, especially when was hearing those groups that were sampling from the jazz tradition and everything like that. And then I guess for me, when I was listening to that pretty early, I kind of had an idea of like what elements I guess I wanted to try to be able to put together, you know, in my own music.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind
And
of
it was just stuff that I loved too, you know. So
so more genres, yeah, more different type of inspirations in terms of the music.
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking now from vocalists. I was thinking from vocal perspective, you know, and but yeah, man, so
And
many.
Sean, in terms of Jets poet, do you
Mhm.
have I mean, a point of reference, or is the same? More inspirations.
In terms of just a poet,
Yeah, yeah.
um, like Yusef Komonyaka was
Not
somebody I really love. Really wonderful poet. Amiri Baraka was someone who I spent a lot of time with his work as well. Um, yeah, you know, and then yeah, a lot of just sort of also classics, you know,
yeah,
just a
yeah,
lot of
of
the
course.
classic
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So, um, and so yeah, I mean, there were also a lot of just writers, I guess, who for me have just had you can kind of just extract poetry from just their way of writing novels or something, you know. I mean, also as well. Uh, Richard Wright was somebody who was like really fell in love with as a writer. Um, Poets, Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, a lot of these Black American poets were
Yeah,
definitely people who I was reading. I've read over the years.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I imagine that gives you more ideas in terms of how to develop your writing styles. I mean, having different type of inspirations.
Yeah, it gives you ideas, and it also places the bar at a certain level,
Mm,
you know, and that's actually what's important, because when you're reading these masters of verse, then and you say, okay, well, I'm going to try to jump in the ring. I mean, then you see where the bar is. You see how high that standard can be, and you just try to shoot for it.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
That's why you told me that poetry is the hardest part for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just at the center.
Mm.
It's just at the center, and yeah, without that, there's so many things obviously that go into I guess my life as a musician. Obviously the work I've been doing with Jazzanova, and the work I've done as a pianist, and the work I've just done in different areas. But if it wasn't for the poetry, if it wasn't for the lyrics, and that just focus, and that it's just a feeling, I don't know, it's something that you're I don't know, sometimes it's something I hesitate to say this, but I had the feeling that it's something that you're either oriented towards, you're geared towards, or you're not. It's kind of hard to get in there and go in that space if it's just not something that feels natural to you. And I think that it was just something that very early on just grabbed me as a way to try to make sense of life and try to express myself. It was just my attempt to try. I wrote a lot. I've filled up so many books of, with verse and things over the years, that, just trying to make sense in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. I know what I mean. I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
imagine that,
yeah, yeah,
spirit situation inside of you. So,
yeah, yeah.
and Sean, you mentioned Jazzanova
Mhm.
before. So 2022, I imagine, it has been a wonderful year for yourself in terms of the music, it's here, finally it's back.
Yeah.
Uh, I love that album.
Yeah,
I love each song. One of my favorite songs is, Face at My Window, as I told you before, the introduction
yeah, yeah.
by you as well and DJ Amir. Um, so my question is, how was your experience in, collaborating with Jazzanova and creating this, masterpiece in my opinion?
Yeah, the Jazzanova album happened during COVID. So all that came together. I was already going to be working with them. I had a meeting with them about going out and just being on tour with them already, as working as a vocalist with them. But the Strata album was not in the picture yet. I went on tour with them. I went on tour with them. Or no, I'm trying to remember the chronology of how things happened. I'm especially like I'm bad about this anyway, but especially the last couple of years. But anyway, so this was already in the picture, and then Amir had approached Jazzanova about doing this project. I had already been in discussion with them, because I actually wasn't sure. I listened to their catalog and I was like, well, what am I going to do here? Like, what music am I going to do from the catalog? and was curious, obviously Paul Randolph has done a great job over the years with them. And then, yeah, this project, Strata project, came in view, and it was a perfect fit. We recorded it in COVID, the COVID years. It was different, man. It was different because it was just such a strange time, like
Yeah.
it just on some level, I didn't feel like completely at like my top level of fitness because I just wasn't performing. I wasn't performing. Wasn't singing, wasn't playing, wasn't doing much, and it's just like kind of, and I'll admit I'm been a bit of a lazy vocalist over the years because I just kept in shape just by performing a lot. And that kind of worked for me, but then COVID, like you're not in shape, by performing. So what are you going to do? So anyway, that the project came together during that time, and it was great. It was great working with them. And it was also great knowing that on the other side of this thing, like when this thing, finally, settles down, that this was waiting there, so so that was really nice to know that, okay, this is really not good right now, this is obviously dark for so many people, but okay, at least this is out there. You're working with Jazzanova now, and you got this. So when things finally clear up, you'll have some great times touring with them and sharing this music, and that's what this year has definitely been. It was an amazing year for me. I mean, I ended up having to have neck surgery. I had neck surgery in February, and a spinal surgery, and it was a major surgery. And I just had some nerve thing going on, and just it progressed. It was a problem. And so for me, this year is like, January, I was beat down. I was broken down from what I needed to have done with the surgery. And then it was I was kind of waiting around, waiting for the surgery to happen. Had that, and then just trying to recover from this. And then it was like 5 weeks later, we were on tour in the UK. So, which was mad. I mean, when I think back to it, I mean, because I was supposed to have a little more time, but I got COVID. Then my surgery got pushed back. And so it was like 5 weeks after surgery, I'm standing on stage trying to move around, but I still can't move like normally yet. Like I can't carry stuff,
Yeah.
And so I think back to the first tour, I'm like, man, it's a pity that we played London and Manchester, like when I was just not fit, I was not fit yet. So, but yeah, it's been quite a year, and just growing with the band, evolving, kind of finding my place in that ensemble. Like I said, because Paul Randolph was the vocalist for several years. I don't even know how many years. For many years, he was the vocalist with them on tour.
On tour, yeah.
And doing albums, doing the albums with them, songs on the albums. So it's tough to fill a role that somebody else has had, as you're not just like the bass player or the drummer, like you're the standing for, the face of the band, and people have expectations, of course. And I'm listening to it like, okay, how do I do this song that, like, this guy's made famous, and so it's been fun. It's been a journey. For me, it's been a great growth process. So just like finding my way into their catalog, and performing. And like, yeah, of course, we've played some great stages, wonderful festivals. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, I think like March or something like that is when it all kicks off again, or so. I think we're playing I know we're playing in Jakarta Jazz Festival like this year. I'm looking forward to that. I know that's in the calendar, so it's gonna be nice again. Yeah.
Which country, Sean?
We're playing in Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay. Never been there. So it's funny because I was about to ask you, what is it the most thing you're proud of if you think about the Strata record? But now I have more context around you
Yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, about the Strata record, what I'm most proud of?
about the
I-
Strata record. So you
Yeah,
uh
I don't know.
collaborate, you know.
It's a tough question. I don't know, man. I mean, I haven't really thought about it, to be honest with you. Um, I guess in the context of just the band, I guess,
Yeah, in
and
the
the
context
work,
of the
yeah,
band.
in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
context of the band and the work we've done over the last year, I guess I'm most proud of just kind of the ways I've found to grab a hold of this music, you know,
Mm.
for myself. You know, the Strata music, the Strata record is kind of easy to perform in a certain way because I'm the vocalist on that album.
Of course. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, the other material that someone else, you know, that Paul was doing for all those years was more challenging to figure out, okay, how do I do this to make it mine, you know? So, but yeah, I'm proud of just, I guess, of the development I've continued to have. I mean, it's the great thing is, you know, this music journey is for, it doesn't matter how long you do it, you just continue, you can continue to keep growing and learning and evolving. And that, I mean, that's the beauty of it, really, you know.
Of course. And how do you see yourself today, Sean, if think about the first album and the Strata Records? So how, Sean developed,
Um,
musically speaking, but also,
yeah, I mean,
internally.
the 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 thing that, speaking of, this is one of the things I guess I am most proud of for sure in my work over the years, is that when I go back and I listen to stuff, or I don't really do that, but if and by chance I happen to go back and check something out, I want to listen to something from the first album or something, or I hear it, I'm always like, wow, like that sounds good, actually, you know, for the most part it sounds good to me still. And that's what I'm most happy about, you know. That's what uh I wanted to do. Like, that was definitely, I mean, you want to try to make the music uh as timeless as possible, you know, stand the test of time. And there was this year that was really cool. um Teak, this Japanese company. I don't know if you know them. They make
No, no.
like hi-fi audio stuff. But
Okay.
anyway,
I don't know that.
they released a compilation, and they pressed some different artists on this compilation, the vinyl thing, and I ended up being selected with balance on that compilation, which I don't they didn't realize at first, but I mean, I released balance in 2007, you know, and so to have that released from them on this hi-fi compilation in 2022, it was pretty cool to me, you know. That makes me happy, you know. That makes me happy because if the music's, you know, still there, still that relevant, and, you know, doesn't sound dated, and it's just vital, then that's cool. So I guess when I look back on it, from that work, and like, yeah, that was the second album, and uh for the most part I'm just really happy with everything. In some ways it's funny, I guess, because you set out, uh maybe you have certain goals in your mind, or certain ideas in your mind of things you want to achieve, and or how what success is, I guess, you know, is always a kind of interesting question of how we define that. And I've actually managed to achieve a lot of things that I wanted to achieve, like just artistically, the artistic goals that I had in mind. I worked hard. I worked hard and reached a lot of those goals, and I still have so much more to learn, so much more growing to do, and I'm always practicing, always trying to get better. I mean, it's a never ending journey, you know.
Of course.
And
Absolutely.
a lot of time with the drums now. But like when I look back on it and I see what I had in mind, this kind of sound, and I think about from the poetry and the jazz and the hip hop and all these things, and this sound that I had in my mind, which was, it was abstract in a way, but like I had to make it concrete. And I managed to make it concrete over these years with these albums, you know, managed to materialize into what was really just kind of abstract imagination, you know, at one point.